mission statement says that we are as separate from government connection and influence and funding as matter is from antimatter. We defend the Constitution without regard to the unpopularity of the person or cause, without regard to the partisan politics, and without regard to political correctness. While the CRC may not agree or disagree with any or all of the content of our guests, one thing that we do stipulate is that we'll defend their right to freedom of expression and speech, which is at the core of our Constitution, the rule of law, and our democratic structures. So I'm very happy to have this panel. I'd add that we are also joined by Dominic Desjardins, who is a Montreal lawyer who works with Stéphane Blais. And I'm also proud to say I'm co-counseling with Dominic on a case to be filed very soon in the next day or two in Quebec, challenging the curfew by way of habeas corpus and other constitutional relief. I'm proud to be working with Dominic because he's a bright, diligent lawyer. And it's great that others are joining in with these legal challenges. Now, I'm going to be moderating this roundtable, and when we talk about the law, there's two aspects about the law that people should take into account. There's the political side of the law, and that is the legislature. On the flip side of the political side of the law are the citizens. Does the legislature listen to the citizens? If not, when the laws are promulgated, what's the reaction of the citizens? Often the reaction of the citizens is non-compliance. So citizens speak in reaction to the legislature's laws. And often you will see instances historically of non-compliance, such as abortion, the marijuana laws, and other laws, prostitution, that did not sit well with the citizens. And these are extreme examples of where the political side of the law interacts from the legislature to the citizens. The other aspect to law, of course, is the courts. And where compliance of the law it comes into play in the courts is where people are charged for non-compliance, and then people can invoke the Constitution to challenge the laws. So the compliance of the laws can be constitutionally challenged. And so with that, I'm very happy to have and start the conversation with Randy Hillier, who's an elected member of Parliament, provincial Parliament in Ontario. And Randy, just give us a rundown from your perspective. We know you've been very vocal in the context of the emergency measures and COVID. Has the legislature of Ontario worked fine as usual, or has it failed?
Well, I don't know if anybody would say it has ever worked fine. However, at whatever level of credibility and integrity that it was working previously, it is substantially diminished in the last 10 months. So, the legislature has abrogated and has forgotten its function and role in large part. And I'll put it in this way, legislators and elected representatives have forgotten their responsibilities, and they have forgotten and failed to understand how the system works, much in the same fashion that individuals are forgetting or have lost sight about their role in our representative democracy.
Right. So let's focus that, Randy. What aspects of the role has the legislature forgotten in the context of COVID?
Well, we've certainly have lost sight of the necessity and the origins of representative democracy, that I'm elected to represent my constituents. I'm not elected to be a mouthpiece or a pundit or a parrot for a party. That's a distortion of what my role is. Parliament is derived from the French word parler, and it's to mean to speak. The corollary of that has to be to listen. And and people are not speaking. They're not speaking on behalf of their constituents, and they're not listening to their constituents. They're listening to a party brass, party leadership, and they're being provided the commentary that they're permitted to speak in the legislature. So it's a really fundamental distortion here. And it's the same thing, similar with what we see with the general public. Many people in the general public have lost sight of their role of informing their elected representatives of what their expectations are, of what their desires are. And it's through that two-way discussion, conversation between elected people and constituents, and bringing that forth and having the same sort of discussion in our parliaments, that it works well, and where the law is consistent with the expectations of individuals. What we've seen in the last 10 months is a complete disregard for process and a complete allegiance, I would say, by the executive branch of every legislature in the House of Commons to follow a fearful mob that they've helped to create, and disregard and vilify those who don't have the same view as the mob.
Okay, so Randy, if the legislature, and as you've eloquently expressed, has lost focus and sight on the ball of the traditional democratic institution of Parliament, what, in your view, then, are they fixated in terms of interest at the Premier and inner cabinet level? What are they fixated on if they're not fixated on democratic process in the legislature?
Well, that's simple to answer that one. They are fixated on their re-election. They are not fixated on the public interest. They're not fixated on discourse and debate. Everything that I've seen in my 14 years in the legislature, and I see this with all parties and all caucuses, is they become fixated, and they examine any subject or any topic or any policy through a singular lens of re-election. Will my position gain me votes, or will it lose me votes? And that is really a wholly skewing of its purpose. It takes and fundamentally transforms the term leadership into changing leaders into followers of polls, followers of focus groups, followers, in the last 10 months, followers of the mob.
Right. So let me get Stefan to weigh in on this conversation. Stefan, you're a chartered accountant by profession. I understand you're a grandfather. I hate you for that because you look very young. But so you set up this foundation to support the enforcement of our constitutional rights, and I can, full disclosure, the Constitutional Rights Center has been the recipient of your foundation support, and we thank you for it.
It's a pleasure.
You're also visible in the news as participating, and in fact, your foundation has organized some pretty massive protest rallies against the measures in Montreal and in Quebec. So give us an idea in Quebec, where you reside and act, what's been the reaction of the citizens to these measures?
Well, actually, most people have a reflex to believe what governments are saying. And as you know, at the very beginning of this crisis, I've never believed a word, with all the scandals we had in Quebec and in the rest of Canada. I've never believed what governments are telling us. So I decided at the very beginning of the crisis to create through I'm the head of a small political party. We're more activist than people who search for a career in politics. We've decided to create this foundation, and the purpose of the foundation, we have 3 missions: to awake the people, okay, for different scams that we have in the system. We're talking about the financial system.
You mean different schemes? Your pronunciation was off. A scam in English is something fraudulent, but you mean different schemes or plans?
Yeah, that's
okay.
right. That's right. Okay. Sorry about my English.
It's okay.
Whether it's financial, whether it's political, whether it's media, we're trying to awake the consciousness of the people towards these different problems. This is the fact, the mission number 1. And then we mobilize them. And of course, we are very proud to see that the people in Quebec decided to get behind the foundation and to participate quite massively to some of the rally that we organized. We organized some rallies, some convoy. We had from 50,000 people to 80,000 people in the streets of Montreal for the rally. We had the first convoy was a 85-kilometer convoy. The second one was a 250 kilometers long convoy on both the Highway 40 and 20 in Quebec. So we are very proud to see that people are more and more getting conscious, and they participate in order to send a clear message to the government. But the main mission of the foundation is to gather the best lawyers in Quebec, in Canada, and throughout the world in order to put these people together, try to find the best specialists that could help them into this COVID-19 crisis, and of course to support our allies financially. And the first time we met in May 2020, we did commit to help on your lawsuit that you filed on July the 6th. We worked together with Vaccine Choice Canada and yourself, and we did commit ourselves the Constitutional Rights Center. I won't tell anybody for a moment what is the amount that we commit to yourself, but the amount, and it's a pleasure to and it's important for me to say that a guy like Rocco Galati, even if he's the best, one of the best constitutional lawyer in Canada and probably in the world, he has a lot on his shoulder, and he has to increase the structure of his organization. And people have to realize how important it is to donate to the Constitutional Rights Center, because it's going to have more resources, and the more resources you have, the more we're going to go forward, and we're going to be more efficient. So it's very important.
And so before I turn it over to the lawyer, Stefan, I have a last quick question for you for now.
Yeah.
We understand when you're out in Montreal protesting with 80,000 or 100,000 other citizens, that they're definitely have objections to the way the measures are being rolled out. Yeah, the rest of the population, in your opinion, how do you think it breaks down in terms of citizens who are fully supportive of the measure, as opposed to citizens who are just afraid, who don't know, can't parse or can't analyze the science, the medicine, the law for themselves, and are simply quiet in compliance? Do you have a sense of how that breaks down?
Yeah, what I do see is that a lot of people are afraid to talk, because when you talk and you're an employee, there are some consequences, especially if you work for the government or a subsidiary of the government. But even if you work for some employers who receive money from the government, and especially the media, because the media are now there's so much money going into the media with their advertising for the COVID-19 and like that. That all the journalists. I know you're going to talk about the media in another roundtable, but media and governments, a lot of people inside, they talk to us and they say that they cannot talk because they're going to lose their job. So I do believe, for the moment, if you want to have a number, I do believe that more than 35% of the population is, and probably more, and I'm very conservative because I'm an accountant, I do believe that 1/3 of the population behind us, okay, and those who do not talk, we have 50% of the population, according to me, on our side. For the rest, it's a matter, as Dr. Fouché said in an interview that I made with him, he's going to be one of our experts. We have to take every issue that concern each individual and take the time to explain to these people. And probably that Dominic is going to talk about the letter that we sent the Quebec Premier about the supposedly vaccine. But it's a matter of taking each individual and knowing and trying to find the door in order to awake the people. We have to be patient. Right. Okay. We should not fight. We have to be patient, and let's be open for those people who are already awake. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to turn to Amina Sherazee, who is one of the operational directors of the center. There's three of us. I'm the executive director. Amina and Paul Slansky, who's not here today, are the other two directors, and then we have staff, and we have other colleagues who volunteer some of their time in assisting us. Amina, what in your view, you've been practicing, you've been a human rights litigator for 20 years. What sticks out for you in this whole environment and with the COVID measures as a lawyer?
Well, it's exactly as Stefan said. People are afraid to talk, and they're also afraid to listen. And for me, that is antithetical to a free and democratic society, where we have constitutionally enshrined and protected fundamental rights and freedoms. And also what Randy Hillier is talking about in terms of the legislature. And as you said, that the legislature is not listening to the people, but rather the legislature are the people. And I think that's what's happened, is the chilling environment of censorship, which we see are having a more adverse impact on the people who need to speak the most, which are the physicians, the nurses, the so-called frontline workers. We're not hearing from the police and the social workers who are interfacing with segments of the population that have been most devastated by the lockdowns, which to me is the most important evidence that we need to look at to do a reality check as to, are the legislatures listening to the people? Are the legislature representing the people and the suffering of the people? And are the legislature respecting the constitutional rights to which they must obey? So it seems to me that the legislature has put itself above our supreme law, which is the Constitution, and the people have put themselves much below the legislature and the Constitution. And so this is a real crisis in democracy. It's a real crisis in Canadian society. For the first time, we are experiencing this free and democratic society ring hollow for not just the most the most crucial voices, which are the voices of the frontline workers, but also for the voices of the majority, by a silencing discourse, which is, the criminalization almost of dissent, where doctors are being persecuted for speaking out and sharing their experience of the horror stories that they're seeing in the ER rooms, and the politicians who are just quietly following orders. So this is a real crisis in democracy, I think, that has been brought about by this COVID crisis.
Yeah, we may want to mention that we're now have filed our on record as counsel to 3 different proceedings against Medical College in Ontario, in British Columbia, and we're filing suit. We're defending doctors who they're trying to gag, and we're filing civil lawsuit against any gagging of doctors. Also, you might have noticed in the press that I was retained by a group of police officers to seek clarification from the Superior Court on their duties, responsibility, discretion, and constitutionality of the orders that they are being compelled by their supervisors to enforce, which does not sit well with their oath or the Constitution, which the police officer's oath has them swear to have allegiance to Her Majesty, but moreover, to uphold the Constitution. And so just before I turn it to Dominic, Amina, what in concrete terms do you really see the most vicious victims of these measures in terms of not only their constitutional rights, but obviously how it impacts them in their personal lives?
Well, the victims are the most vulnerable sectors of society. And, for me, it's children with special needs who are not having any support services whatsoever. It's the victims of domestic violence who are told to stay at home when home is not safe for them. It's the disabled who are told to stay home and not seek out the services and not go to the hospitals to get the care that they need. It's the complete, obliteration of the rights of the elderly who are locked up in their long-term care facility. So the exact people for whom we have ameliorative, provisions under the Charter and in our laws and policies, those are the same ones who are suffering the most under the lockdown. And I just want to say that, we've come to a point where police and doctors and nurses are put in a position where they are having to privately take on a cause which should be publicly debated. Like, if there wasn't a breakdown of our legislature and our democratic system, then we would have these voices in consultation process. There would be due process where before enacting so-called health policies, we would be hearing from all these voices. And that's what due process mandates. Under Section 7 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we as citizens are guaranteed the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. And the Supreme Court has interpreted that in the healthcare context to mean the right of the patient to have a consultation with their physician for their private care in order to make informed choices. And when physicians are being controlled by their college and public health policies and being told that they must only do X, Y, and Z, and they must force the patient to have vaccination because that's what's required, then that's a complete breakdown and abrogation from the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court and undermining that right. Then there's also the right under Section 7 of every health policy that we have. It must follow due process. It must be in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. And one of the requirements of principles of fundamental justice is that policies that are promulgated by the government should go through rigorous public debate and a consultative process prior to being enacted. We're not seeing that.
We can add that as we were discussing, you pointed out to me, Amina, before we went on, that's an actual holding of the Supreme Court of Canada and Rodriguez and other cases on healthcare, is it not? That fundamental justice under Section 7 requires prior public debate and discourse before you implement health policies of this magnitude. So,
and there's two components of that. There's also the procedural component, but there's a substantive component of it, which requires us to look at international human rights treaty, look at our obligations under those conventions that we've signed, but also how other charter rights are being impacted. And the other charter rights that are being impacted are Section 2B, which is the freedom of expression, where physicians are basically being persecuted for saying anything that goes contrary to the public health and WHO narrative. And Section 15, that's another one that's being caught by this, because it's the most vulnerable segments of the population that are suffering the most adverse impact. So what I'm seeing is a complete breach of our charter rights, as well as how the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court has set out and fleshed out those rights, and Parliament completely ignoring them, and people not being informed of what they are and how to stand up for them. So it's a very, very scary time.
So before I do another round in terms of solutions from the guests, I want to turn it over to Dominique. Dominique, pour les personnes qui se trouvent au Québec, pour l'audience québécoise, est-ce que tu peux expliquer le procès que tu vas déposer d'ici quelques jours vis-à-vis le couvre-feu au Québec?
Bonjour Rocco, avant de commencer, j'aimerais te remercier de m'avoir invité à cet événement. C'est un honneur pour moi d'être sur ce panel avec tout le monde et plus particulièrement avec toi. On a déjà participé ensemble à un panel quand j'étais à Stockholm. Alors, c'est un honneur. Donc, voilà, je m'implique avec la Fondation en tant qu'avocat pour considérer le recours judiciaire. Je dois dire que quand j'ai été contacté par Stéphane l'automne dernier pour considérer être avocat pour la Fondation, la réponse a été assez rapide parce que pour moi, ne rien faire n'était pas une option. Très tôt dans la crise, au printemps dernier, j'ai été sensible au fait que nos droits constitutionnels étaient affectés. Il y avait un haut potentiel pour que les droits constitutionnels soient affectés. Et le temps a donné raison à l'atteinte à ces droits-là, parce que présentement, quand on regarde les droits constitutionnels qui sont dans la Charte, ils sont pratiquement tous affectés par les mesures qui sont mises en place, tant au Québec que dans le reste du Canada également. On regarde un peu partout dans le monde, il y a des mesures semblables qui viennent affecter les droits des gens. Alors, pour moi, ne rien faire n'était pas une option. Je dois dire que ce sont des dossiers très complexes. Et c'est très, comme on dit, challengeant pour un avocat. C'est très stimulant également. Donc, c'est du droit à certains égards de haute voltige. Alors, oui, on considère divers recours. Présentement, il y a un couvre-feu au Québec. C'est le seul endroit au Canada où il y a un couvre-feu. Et pour moi, c'est la mesure qui, selon moi, fait le moins de sens au niveau légal et au niveau constitutionnel. Alors, on m'a demandé de travailler sur un recours pour attaquer le couvre-feu au Québec. Alors, il y a beaucoup de travail qui se fait présentement et le dépôt est imminent. Alors, on donne le scoop aujourd'hui. Également, il y a des questions légales très, très complexes et multiples qui sont analysées présentement pour un recours plus élargi, semblable au tien, Rocco, qu'on veut déposer également au Québec. Alors, il y a énormément de travail avec des experts internationaux qui se fait. Je dois mentionner également que pour moi, ce qui est important, and I'll say it in English.
Yeah, in order not to lose the audience, it's important to switch in English. Yeah.
For me, what's important, as I said earlier, doing nothing for me as a lawyer was not an option. So being involved with the foundation by Stéphane, and it's very challenging as a lawyer, but I was invited to go to the Stockholm Summit with other lawyers and international experts in the scientific and medical field. And for me, participating at the Stockholm Summit showed me one thing, is that cooperation is key. And cooperation is key between all fields of expertise. And cooperation is also key between different fields of expertise. For example, in a case like this, as you know, Rocco, cooperation between lawyers and scientific and medical people is crucial because we're facing a sanitary crisis and there are a lot of scientific and medical questions in play. And going to Stockholm, I must say, opened many doors in terms of international cooperation, well, local cooperation and also international cooperation to share ideas, because as we see right now, any decision that is rendered in a country can have an impact on other countries on COVID issues.
Okay.
There's been many decisions like the Portugal decision on PCR tests can have an impact everywhere in the world. The decision, there was a decision recently in Germany concerning some COVID measures that were declared unconstitutional. The masking for children in Austria was declared unconstitutional. So all decisions, even in Canada, when some decisions will come out, they can have an impact on COVID measures in every country. So cooperation is key. And also what is key, what I took out from the Stockholm Summit is that people have to know their rights, understand their rights, and assert their rights.
Okay, thank you,
one of the things that you mentioned also, Rocco, on many times is that what people have and that the authorities don't have is consent.
Right. Yeah, I've
and the
always
power
said
to consent or to not to consent. That's one of the things that is also key. You reiterated it many times, and I totally agree with what you said on that. So people have to understand their rights, know that they can take their power back through asserting their rights, knowing their rights, and becoming aware of the fact that right now we're in a crisis where fundamental rights and freedoms are being trampled on.
Okay, so in the about 7 or 8 minutes we have left, I'd like to boomerang back to Randy Hillier, and if you can all take 2 minutes and give us, from your perspective, starting with Randy, solutions and concrete actions that everybody can engage in, or thoughts on how do we turn this suspension of the Constitution in a democratic country back.
Well, the solutions are simple to state. They're not so simple to implement because of the fear. But as I said at the beginning, we need a healthy society, and a successful society must be able to speak and must be able to listen. And far too many people are fearful to speak. I believe the numbers who are opposing these COVID measures to be substantial. And we see it through doctors, lawyers, police, elected officials. They're hesitant, not only hesitant, they're fearful to speak out. And, if we go back, we learned this hundreds of years ago from Edmund Burke, for the only thing for that will allow evil to triumph is for good people to remain silent. Okay, so that is, we have to encourage people to find their voice, and it's no sense saying somebody else should say something, or the police should say something, or Rocco should say something. If you're looking for somebody to speak, then you have to first look in the mirror and say, why isn't that person speaking? That's the person who needs to speak out. If you're going to, as Dominic said, we need to understand our rights, but we also need to assert them. If you don't assert your rights, you are not free. And, we've got other groups like the nomorlockdowns.ca, where we're doing things to help people find a voice, to put a lawn sign out in your yard to say no more lockdowns. We're developing local volunteer groups to go out and canvass and provide information to people. So, what people need to do is find their voice, and don't be fearful of some troll or some bot on social media who may call you names and nasty names. I can say to you, Rocco, and to everybody listening in, when I started this endeavor 10 months ago, a lot of people were vilified me and called me names. But I can say to everybody, that doesn't happen frequently anymore. People know that I'm going to stand up, I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and I don't care if you call me names. I'm going to, and so they've learned to go somewhere else. They'll go after weaker targets. We need to encourage people to have the resolve, the conviction, and not let Edmund Burke's statement take root and destroy our society.
Thank you, Randy. Because of you, I do what I would have thought was the unthinkable. I watch parliamentary television. Thank you very much. Stefan?
Which sometimes could be a little bit boring. I do believe, I'm sorry about that, but it's never boring when it's Randy Hillier speaking. Never. I do believe that the perception that people could have from others, if you think that if you give too much importance about what others are thinking of you, you create your own jail. Okay, know yourself, be yourself, and get rid of what the people could think about you, and you're going to be it's going to be a good step forward to be free. And this will give you courage. And we need courage to get through this. And as Dominic said, a lot of people have decided to be courageous. They step forward. They decided to gather, to work, to put their different forces together in order to strike back what's happening right now. And what's happening right now, Rocco Galati said it at the very beginning of this crisis on Twitter, and I was the first one to retweet. Said that we were actually experiencing an attempt from the oligarch to put us into a fascist worldwide state. This is what's happening. No matter if you're happy or not, this is actually what's happening, because these guys, they have money, they have power, and they've decided to play a game. And a lot of people, if we're talking about politics, are influenced by these guys. Not Randy Hillier, but a lot of people are afraid. Those who are supposed to represent as member of parliaments the population. So don't be afraid. Be courageous. Know yourself, and face the music. And this is the best service you can give to your children and to the generation to come. Be courageous. Someday you're going to be proud to say, well, I stand up, and because I did stand up, we live in a free world. And I just want to remind the people that the law of law is the Constitution. This is, the playground where politicians have to play, and now they are actually going, outside the playground. And between a prime minister and the Constitution, the real boss is the Constitution. And people don't seem to understand that. And this is why it is important to have an independent organization such as the Constitutional Rights Center. It has, and it's going to be there to protect our rights and freedoms. So
thank you, Stefan. Thank you very much.
You have to donate. This is important.
Yeah, thank you. Amina, minute and a half or less.
And we need to petition our courts. And that's what the Constitutional Rights Center is doing. We are defending those who are being vilified and who are being censored, because that is one of the first steps in the authoritarian, the regression into authoritarianism that we are witnessing and living, and most likely are going to continue to do so unless we go to the courts. And we see some hope there, because we are seeing very good precedents being set elsewhere in the world. But we at the Constitutional Rights Center are defending those who are speaking up and who are being vilified. And that's why we need your support so that we can continue doing that.
Okay, Dominic.
Yeah, what I want to...
10 minutes.
Yeah, 1 minute for lawyers is quite short. So I want to salute your initiative with the Constitutional Rights Center, Rocco. And I invite people to donate, because it's very important, because what you've been doing since March of last year is educate people. And for people to know about their rights and to be able to assert them, education is key. And what you've been doing is wonderful. And you've also educated me on a lot of issues. And filing legal challenges is one thing, but educating people is something else. And what Randy said is that a lot of people are still in fear right now, and fear often comes from ignorance. So that's why educating people on their rights, on what is possible for them, is something that needs to be continuing. And we'll continue as lawyers to work on legal challenges, but we also have a role in educating people in all of this crisis.
All right. So I'd like to thank all of our guests on this roundtable, fabulous roundtable. It's great
Thank
to
you, Russ.
see you again, Randy, Stefan,
Thank you very much.
Dominic.
See you around,
And,
Rocco.